What's going on YouTube? It's Tej back again with another video, and today we're talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars in our season preview series, and hopefully you all enjoyed today's video about the Jags, and if you do, be sure to hit that like button to help me out a ton. And if you're new around here and want to see the rest of the series, more football content in general, just hit that big red subscribe button, and while you're headed down below to subscribe, hopefully be sure to leave a comment. Tell me what you think about the Jags this upcoming season. How are you feeling about Doug Peterson, how that offense might help out Trevor Lawrence? How many wins do you think they come away with? Who are some X factors and some games you're looking forward to watching this team play? Love to have your thoughts, and I respond to just about every comment. So let's talk about the Jags down below in the comments section. If you're new to the series, welcome to it, and be sure to go back and check out our previous videos so far. But let's jump into the win range and my projected win total, and then we'll talk about each and every position group, kind of give you a feel for where I stand on each point of the roster. But 4 to 7 wins, 7 would be pretty optimistic considering the train wreck that we saw last year with Urban Meyer. We'll talk about that a little bit here in a moment. But right now I got him at 4 wins, and that's in my early record predictions. I might change that. I could totally see this being maybe 5-6 wins because I think this team underperformed last year. But give them flack for the amount of money they spent this offseason. Those were upgrades, expensive upgrades, but upgrades all the same. So this team could certainly be poised to take a step forward. So that number 4, that 4-win mark definitely might change when I get into my final record predictions video. But talking about the roster, obviously Trevor Lawrence, a lot of eggs in that basket. Second year, he's got to take a step forward, and that's really why Doug Peterson gets his job. We'll go ahead and talk about Doug Peterson. I don't know if there's been as big a jump in coaching caliber from what we saw with Urban Meyer last year up to a guy who's won a Super Bowl with Doug Peterson. He's also had success as a play caller and former quarterback in the NFL as well. So perfect fit for trying to nurture Trevor Lawrence. So really don't know if there's ever been as big a step when it comes to a coaching change from Urban Meyer to Doug Peterson. So that's obviously a huge step in the right direction. The only thing that held me back about the Doug Peterson hire was how convoluted that whole process was. Like if the Jags had just moved on from Urban Meyer during the season, then interview Darrell Bevell, because he's the interim, you give him the courtesy, and then interview Doug Peterson, hired him, and it's like, okay, boom, right away, that was the guy. They're clearly, focusing in on that. I'd be like, yep, that's an A+ hire. But that wasn't. The interview, there's some interest, okay, and then it feels like, okay, Byron Leftwich is going to be the guy they hire, but he doesn't want to work with the current GM. He wants to bring in Marco Wilson. Okay, how do we make that happen? Okay, never mind, we're not going to do that. And then Byron Leftwich is now back in Tampa Bay. So really complicated process, and that kind of dinged my excitement about the Doug Peterson hire. But all the same, process aside, fantastic hire there for Doug Peterson and the Jags in and of itself. So you have to feel optimistic about that, and we'll have to see about how this general manager situation plays out. Trent Baalke has not been a guy I'm seen as a favorable hire, or somebody I've been particularly fond of when it comes to the moves he makes in free agency. Again, they spent a lot of money to get upgrades, but not the most substantial upgrades. Even drafting Trevon Walker, who could pan out over Aiden Hutchinson, though, feels like a little bit of a flawed process. But that's just my opinion, and I'm not in that room. So, anyways, moving on. Travis Etienne, James Robinson, that's a solid running back duo. We'll talk about some of those offensive line components, but you'll look at Cam Robinson getting an extension. For a guy who's been about average, and that's really the nicest thing you could say about it, that's a little questionable. You bring in Brandon Sheriff, but a lot of money for a guard on the wrong side of 30. We'll have to wait and see. Going to be a new starter at center, so anytime you start a rookie there, that could cause for some concern, and we'll talk about that right tackle battle a little bit later on. Wide receivers, a lot of money to Christian Kirk, a lot of money to Zay Jones, we'll talk about later on, but I'm not entirely sure those are huge upgrades. Like they're better than Laquan Treadwells of the world, but paying a lot of money to marginally improve that position, and still waiting on Laviska Shenault to take a step forward. You still have Marvin Jones there, but wrong side of 30. So how much can you expect out of him? I do like the Evan Ingram signing. That was actually one free agent move I was pretty fond of. 1 year little flyer prove it deal. Good athlete. He's got some potential. Could work out. So then switching over to defense, and it's a defense that when I was doing my defense rankings, I was kind of surprised how much, I don't want to say I liked it, but how not bad it was. Talking about that edge duo with Josh Allen, who's proven to be really solid NFL starting edge rusher, and Trayvon Walker, who certainly a project, but has legitimately the body and athletic ability and archetype that you would want to be an NFL edge rusher and somebody who could blossom into a superstar. That just remains to be seen. And then a ton of investment at inside linebacker, signing a Luakon and then drafting 2 linebackers, Devin Lloyd in the first, Chad Muma in the third. It's a lot of bodies and not a whole lot of playing time to really go around there, but I like it. And then also on the defensive line, Foto Fatukasi, solid nose tackle addition from the Jets. Good run stopper there in the middle, like that move. And the corners are kind of interesting. That's where I'm worried about the safety group. We'll talk about Andre Siskus. I think he could be a guy that maybe takes a step forward, becomes a ball hawk and a playmaker. But Darius Williams, he's making a lot of money now. But Darius Williams to go along with Shaquille Griffin, who's also making a lot of money. But back-to-back off seasons where they shelled out cash to a corner. Okay. And then Tyson Campbell, second-round pick. Top of the second round, 33rd overall. The second selection under Urban Meyer, so you may feel a little iffy about his judgment with that. But you look at how good Eric Stokes has been, and a lot of the same skills there, speedy, man coverage ability, it's there for Tyson Campbell. So can it stick with him? If so, that's a pretty nice little trio you got there at corner, and that goes a long way for improving that defense and the roster as a whole. And then safety, Rayshon Jenkins is one of the worst contracts in the NFL, in my opinion. I cannot fathom how he got as much money as he did, especially in the same offseason where John Johnson III's, scrapping to make $13 million a year, and now we have the past offseason where Tyrann Mathieu's trying to do the same thing. So a lot of money for a pretty below-average guy, in my opinion, with Rayshon Jenkins, but I am excited to see what Andre Sisco does in year 2. Let's go ahead and start talking about realistic and reach goals. They are what they sound like. Realistic goal, this sounds so, mean, but again, appear functional. You're seeing Urban Meyer losing his mind over, a bad preseason game. And it's like, okay, this is a bad sign of things to come. And then reports start coming in for the Urban Meyer shenanigans. And just when you see the team on the field, it's like, what is this offense? These plays don't make any sense. And then, who's Andre Sisco? I thought he was out there. Yeah, Sisco didn't play a game. So, every week there was just something going on to where the Jags last year were dysfunctional. And they were the one team where, there were other bad teams. You have the Deshaun Watson, clown looming over the Texans. But at least they felt like they were a put-together team. A bad one, but a put-together one. The Jags just felt disjointed, disconnected in every which way. So, just please, for the love of Christ. I'm tired of talking about Jacksonville in such a negative way. But appear functional this year. And then reach goal. Lawrence Shines. If he takes that year 2 leap and you're like, okay, yep, that's the guy who we said was the next Andrew Luck, the next, Peyton Manning, the next John Elway, depending on, how high you were on him. If you see that this year, it's like, okay, great. And then those free agent signings paying off. If Brandon Sheriff has an elite season and it's like, yep, he's right back to being one of the best guards in football and he was healthy. Okay, then you know what? You paid him a lot of money, but if he plays like that, and that's what helps, he played even just a small part in Trevor Lawrence becoming the next superstar and that next franchise guy, the next, top end type of talent at that position, okay, then it's totally worth it. And, Zay Jones making $8 million a year feels a little rich. But, if he has a career year and takes a step forward and becomes a true starting capable outside wide receiver, then, hey, it's all good. And Christian Kirk's making a god ton of money, ridiculous amounts of cash. And he alone kind of reset the wide receiver market. But, hey, if he continues what he did last year, maybe gets, half a step better, and it makes Trevor Lawrence better, then, whatever. It doesn't matter. Great. And, $9 million or whatever Evan Ingram's making this year, it'll be totally worth it if he helps, propel Trevor Lawrence to new heights. So just seeing some of these free agent signings pay off. And, right, if Darius Williams is a playmaker and, becomes another starting corner for this team, and then, okay, yep, it was worth the money. So they shelled out a lot of cash, but I could also see a scenario where it's at least after year 1 of all those signings, you're like, yeah, that was worth it. That was worth it. They did their job. And, once maybe Jacksonville becomes a viable free agent destination, they won't have to pay the Jags tax, which is a lot of people have coined it as because the team's so bad and no one wants to live in Jacksonville for whatever reason, that they have to pay that much more for players to come there. So it's kind of an interesting theory, but, hopefully this free agent class maybe changes the shape of that because they help the Jags win more football games. So let's talk about some X factors. Juwan Taylor's been an absolute train wreck at right tackle. I wish I could say something else because I liked him coming out of Florida, but it's been bad. I mean, most sacks allowed by any tackle over the last 2 years. It's been rough. And I think Walker Little, year 2, coming out of Stanford, guy who battled a lot of injuries, but was also a really good prospect. And when you did see him, played like a first-round type of tackle. It just came down to hey, we didn't see him on the field enough. But right now he's getting the snaps with the ones. Juwan Taylor's also injured, so that's a part of it. But, that might be enough where if Little puts on a display, showcases what he's got, he might hold on to those number one reps. You know what I'm saying? So I could totally see him taking advantage of this opportunity, becoming the starting right tackle. They've got to get better, whether it's Jawan Taylor figuring it out or it's Walker Little stepping in, and just anything you can do to be better than Jawan Taylor at that right tackle spot goes a long way. Again, this is all about Trevor Lawrence, and anything you can do to get better for him, that's a must. And then Zay Jones, we hit on earlier. I don't see number one on this team, especially with DJ Chark being gone now. So it's like, okay, Christian Kirk's going to play from the slot. You have Marvin Jones. I guess he could be your X, so to speak. But Zay Jones might also, and then Laviska Shenault's probably best suited in the slot, so that's kind of a battle for him and Kirk to figure out. Maybe they move Kirk to the outside. I don't know. Now, the entire wide receiver room, again, is really confusing considering how much money they've put into it, but also draft capital with Laviska Shenault's also into the play. So it's wonky. But if Zay Jones, he had some decent games last year for the Raiders, and it was a team that needed someone to step up on the outside at wide receiver, and Zay Jones, I don't want to say completely did that, because if he did, he'd still be in Vegas. But, shined a little bit and was maybe a little bit better than the public perception would have been and the public assumptions would have been. So can that continue, right? And what does Doug Peterson do with Zay Jones at wide receiver? That's, this might have been, spearheaded by Balky. And if that's the case, then that kind of deteriorates my excitement about this. But if Zay Jones was somebody that Doug Peterson was like, hey, that's a wide receiver we don't have to pay $18 million a year to, like we did with Christian Kirk, but he can play for me, I know what I can do with him, then I become a lot more intrigued. It's always fascinating when a coach, and specifically like a play caller for whatever side of the ball, is like, that guy's what I need. Give me that dude. Versus like GM being like, yes, we need wide receiver. Zay Jones, wide receiver. Let's give him money. So it'd be interesting to see if I could find out more information about who kind of was the catalyst for that signing. But Zay Jones, nonetheless, is right now slated to be a starter, and he's going to have a career year if the Jags want to be anything close to relevant. So definitely an X factor there. And then Andre Sisco. So, obviously, him not being around Urban Meyer's probably a good step in the right direction. But, dude, just coming out of Syracuse, like, being serious here, dude with unreal range, great speed, and, like, when he would guess the play, I don't even call it guess, when he would read it right and he knew what was coming, dude's break was snap of a finger quick, and, man, it could generate turnovers with ease. And then you get into the preseason last year, even like 270 snaps that he played last year. You look at his Pro Football Focus run defense grade, and him just crashing downhill, getting into the box, was actually what he did best last year. He had like a 76 run defense grade, which is just the complete opposite of what I would have anticipated coming out of Syracuse. I just said, yeah, that's probably his coverage grade, and then he's got like a 55 against the run, but it was actually the opposite. So considering he's already become a little bit more aggressive and physical, and I'll give some credit to different draft analysts. I didn't see, obviously it was a small sample size because last year at Syracuse he got hurt, but in those games right before he did get hurt, that was something I heard a lot of people making note of. Like, he's been a lot more aggressive, his tackling's improved, he's taking better angles, which was a huge negative in my eyes for Andre Sisco. Those angles he would take, yeah, he would cost himself a lot there. But if he's improved there as a tackler, and he can be somebody you can bring down into the box, and he can be an impact player there on top of what he can do as a rangy player, and somebody who can naturally just be a deep single high safety and generate some turnovers there, that makes him by far and away the most promising safety this team has on the roster. So can he take that year two step forward? Can it all kind of come together? Because this team needs somebody to step up as a safety, because right now those options are not good. But Andre Sisco will have the opportunities, and I think he might have the talent that this team is looking forward to become not only a starter, but like a plus level guy that in 3 to 5 years, when the Jags are thinking they're playoff competitive, maybe Andre Sisco is still a starter there at safety. So let's talk about some games to watch. Common thread here, these are all pretty winnable games. Maybe the Commanders are just outside of it, maybe the Lions are just outside of it, but all three of these opponents, including the Jags as well, all kind of fit into that bottom 8, maybe bottom 10 for the Lions and Commanders. But, lower level opponents here. So they're all winnable games, in my opinion, for the Jags. And, it's not really fair to compare the Jags when they're playing, the Packers and they're punching up against Green Bay. It's not a real fair test to see how this rebuild's playing out. So against the Commanders week 1, this would be just an awesome showing. If they can go into the nation's capital and take down the Commanders, that would do a ton. And all you would hear about anybody who's talking about the Jags is, yep, Urban Meyer's gone. You saw that. That rust and that, that part of this team's history is long gone because they went into Washington, and the Commanders aren't necessarily a perfect team, but that would quote unquote be an upset, one going into Washington, but two, I think the Commanders are a little bit better right now than the Jags, but that would just do wonders for changing the perception around this team, but also like for that locker room, considering everything they went through last year. a win in week 1 has to feel like confidence and mojo would be through the roof, right? And, sometimes those things, they're emotional and you can't really quantify it, but sometimes they make a difference. So then fast forward, we're getting towards the back half of the schedule. I don't include division games in here, but obviously the Jags play the Texans, the Colts, and the Titans. Those are games to watch. But week 13 against the Lions, again, similar state where it's like these two teams are in a rebuild. They're both kind of, one of the weaker teams in the league. Maybe the Lions are a little better. But, in and around that same, kind of category, teams going through rebuild, trying to take that next step forward and return to relevancy. The Lions, though, the little difference here is like they don't have their future franchise quarterback, while the Jags do. And, maybe that's the edge. Maybe Trevor Lawrence does take that step forward. And we're talking about, hey, the Jags have the better quarterback, so make them your bet of the week, right? Like Trevor Lawrence versus Jared Goff, depending on where the line's at, of course. There's your advantage. Go with Trevor Lawrence and the Jags. So another road game. All three of these games are on the road, which is also kind of an interesting commonality I just picked up on. But two teams that are in the middle of a rebuild and trying to showcase they're making progress. They're taking steps forward. So for the Jags, that would really come with Trevor Lawrence and those free agents and young talents kind of hitting. For the Lions, it's like, hey, Jared Goff's like fine. He's just kind of a placeholder, and everything else is really good. So once we get that quarterback, we'll be there. So by week 13, are either one of those two teams hitting their goals? It'll be fun to see if that all does come together leading up to that matchup. But then when they see the field against one another, does that trend continue? And then week 16 against the Jets again, young team in the middle of a rebuild. I think the Jets have done a better job team building wise. Like you look at how they've built around Zach Wilson versus what the Jags have done. I'll take the Lincoln Tomlinson signing at that money versus Brandon Sheriff. I'll take, drafting a Garrett Wilson in the top 10 versus shelling out $18 million to, Christian Kirk. Now, granted, all these situations are very different. Jets weren't picking number 1, right? So the Jags were. So obviously it's all a little different. It's not really apples to apples. But that being said, I feel better about the ecosystem around Zach Wilson compared to that of the situation around Trevor Lawrence. At the time of me recording, it's literally the day after I saw Zach Wilson and what I thought was a torn ACL, but luckily enough, it's just a 2 to 4 week injury. So he will certainly figure to be playing in this game, but looks like he'll be ready to go at least early on in the regular season, if not by week 1. But it's also two teams that are going to be linked to one another almost undeniably because Trevor Lawrence, number 1 overall pick, Zach Wilson's number 2. So anytime these two teams play, that's going to be the talking point. Also, it's the not the lone primetime game technically because they have the 9:30 game against the Broncos on ESPN Plus in like week 9. I could have included that, but this is like the one true primetime late night game that a national audience will be watching. So late in the year, that game will do a ton because both these teams figure to be outside the playoff picture by then. But that game could fuel the fire and fuel the rhetoric moving into the offseason saying, hey, did you see the Jags against the Jets? They tore them apart. Yeah, so that roster is one more offseason away, one more good draft class, a couple more free agent signings, and then they're there. Or it's the other way around where it's like, dude, Zach Wilson put on a show, and if he can do that consistently with the ecosystem, one more offseason, let's add a couple more pieces, the Jets can be serious. So I can totally see that game where, again, level playing field, you get a true comparison value here, Wilson versus Lawrence, but also team to team. And it could, since it's late in the year and both these teams figure to be outside the playoff window, it'll do a ton for the narrative and the rhetoric around those two teams getting into the offseason and free agency, the draft, et cetera, et cetera. So those are some games to watch, and that's going to do it for my Jacksonville Jaguars season preview video. Tell me what you think. Where am I right? Where am I wrong? How many wins do you think the Jags get? Who are some X factors and some games you're looking forward to watching Jacksonville play this year? Love to have your thoughts, and I respond to just about every comment. Hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you did, it really would help me out a ton if you hit that like button. And if you're new around here, you want to see more football content, join the fun and hit that big red subscribe button. That's going to do it for me. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day. And until next time, my name is Tej. I'm signing off.